I want to start off by saying that I'm not wearing a jersey for this one. I'm wearing my 2020 dumpster fire shirt that my wife made me. Because this week it feels like this was sort of who won over who? Seriously? Now what? We're all kind of stuck in the now what territory with a lot of things, including number 32. Now, this was supposed to be set in stone, and apparently it's not. Because what happened this week was the Jacksonville got absolutely destroyed by Baltimore 40-14. Jacksonville, for them now, they're playing out the stretch. They are home against the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears still have something to play for. So you have to think that's going to work against Jacksonville as it did against Baltimore. And that's where we're at. So yeah, the Jaguars are 32 because 31 are the Jets. The Jets beat the Rams. They won on the road. Now keep in mind, one of the reasons why I bumped the Jets up here is because the last couple of weeks they've had games where they probably should have won, right? They've been in the hunt. They've had games they should have won. Jacksonville is Jacksonville, and therefore the Jets jump out of 32nd to 31st. 1-13 record for both teams. Jacksonville now has the inside track on the number 1 draft pick, and we'll see how that treats them. Now for the Jets, if they want to get on a winning streak, they're at home against Cleveland this week, so that's not likely to happen, but I wouldn't have bet on them beating the Rams either, so there you go. Number 30, Houston. For Houston, they are now down to 4-10. Houston this week, they lost in Indianapolis 27-20. They're playing out the stretch. They're at home against Cincinnati this coming week. So that game against Cincinnati is the battle for 29th. The Bengals last night win 27-17 over the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if you're wondering, is it because of Juju dancing on the logo? Yeah. I haven't seen Cincinnati drill somebody that hard all season. I haven't seen the team that determined to win a game all season. And absolutely, so that game between them and Houston will decide who's 29th next week. In all likelihood, unless somebody directly ahead of them loses, and then maybe they both bump up. But for Cincinnati now, they're 3-10-1. They're playing out the string. But I was proud of them last night because it showed some pride. It showed that having somebody dance on your logo before the game and, I'm posting a TikTok, that backstage, if you want to call it that, because that's his stage, that they're saying, all right, we're going to drill this guy every time he touches the ball, right? If we can cause a fumble and a turnover, that'd be great. The one thing I can't understand is that was clearly a catch and a fumble. Absolutely stunned when they said that was called incomplete on the field. I was like, how the hell is that an incomplete pass? That was a completed pass and then murder. It was murder by the Bengals, and he's lucky he's alive because they hit him pretty darn hard, and that is directly because he was dancing under low. You just don't do that. Number 28 is Dallas. So the Dallas Cowboys, they're in an interesting spot now. Dallas wins, so they're at 5-9 now. They're one game back of first in their division. Oh, 5-9 and you're one game out of first. Gotta love the NFC East. So the win that they had this week over San Francisco, 41-33. I didn't think that game looked great for either team. Great game to watch, but I thought both teams had their issues. Now for Dallas this week, what's interesting is they're home against Philadelphia, a team that's also struggling to get victories and are actually below them in the overall standings. So Dallas could make a jump this week with a victory, and if Washington loses, they find themselves tied for first because this is the reality we now live in. Number 27, Detroit. So the Lions... for the Lions, they got destroyed 46-25 by Tennessee. Tennessee, pretty good team, though. For the Lions now, they are 5-9. They're done. They're not making the playoffs, obviously. And this week, they're at home against Tampa. So Tampa should defeat them because Tampa, this is a big game. Tampa's now in a position where they aren't really out of it for the division, not like one might have thought, as New Orleans has a bit of an issue right now. And yeah, we'll see how things go. Number 26 is Philadelphia. So Philadelphia drops back a little bit this week. For Philadelphia, Their result this week, they lost 33-26 against Arizona. Just couldn't get the points when they needed them. And so they find themselves at 4-9-1. Likely not going to win the division. Probably not going to win the division. Probably. Technically, they still can. They can go to 6-9-1, and Washington can drop to 6-10. So it can happen. That's again, that's the world we now live in. But for the Eagles, it was a less impressive game than last week. Number 25, the Chargers. The Chargers started the week off with an overtime victory over the Las Vegas Raiders, 30-27. Again, I'd like to see more stops from this defense. I love Herbert. I think Herbert's great, but they're going to have to work on that defense. They're going to have to work on other parts of the team in the offseason. For the Chargers, they're now 5-9. They could move out of last place with this week. They are, I believe, in Denver. No, they're at home against Denver, actually. So they can move out of last place in their division. If the Chargers ended up 6-10, I would qualify that as a pretty good season. Much better than I would have expected at the start of the year. I would have probably predicted a 4-12 kind of start or kind of season for them. Number 24, the Giants. They lost 20-6 against Cleveland. This is a team with issues. But again, they're 5-9. They're in the NFC East. They're still technically in this. And for the Giants, they're going to Baltimore. Baltimore should be able to take them out. For Baltimore, they're in an interesting spot in that you'll notice they're not in the playoffs, but they have a very good record. So it's possible that the Giants could make the playoffs and Baltimore doesn't, which just feels wrong. But again, for the Giants, they dropped back a little bit. Carolina had a half-decent game. They lose 24-16 against Green Bay. Respectable result. But if you're one of the Green Bay doubters, that game probably won't change that a whole lot. So for the Carolina Carolina Panthers, they're now 4-10, and again, playoffs. There's no playoffs for them. Number 22 is San Francisco. That loss 41-33 against Dallas hurts them. Now they're in Arizona. They're 5-9. That's it. So there was maybe some sort of a comeback happening for them at one point this year, but that's all done. I think honestly with San Francisco, I think next year they'll be a lot better. I would look for a huge bounce back from San Francisco next year. But this year, it's not. To me, they're like where Tampa was last year. Last year, Tampa's record didn't show you how good they were. I think San Francisco next year is going to have that bounce back. Number 21, Atlanta. Now, for Atlanta, they're also at 4-10. They lost 31-27 against Tampa. They were game, though, against a pretty good Tampa team, right? They didn't get destroyed. And for Atlanta this coming week, they're in Kansas City. Might get destroyed there. So, as they play out the string, and most of these teams are playing out the string, I have Atlanta at 21. At 20, Denver. So, the Denver Broncos this week, they were at home and got destroyed by Buffalo 48-19. But you know what? Buffalo's just that good. And I almost did a video after that Buffalo win congratulating them on winning their division for the first time in 25 years. What an amazing run they're on. So I thought, you know what? It says more about how good Buffalo is than how bad Denver is. And again, we're in teams that are not going to make the playoffs anyways. For the Chargers now, they're playing against Denver. We'll see whether or not the Chargers can jump past them. And like I said, if the Chargers can get to 6-10, I would consider that kind of a victory. Number 19, Kevin Malone's out of Washington. So the Washington team that doesn't have a name, they did lose against Seattle, which we would have expected, but they only lost 20-15. So it wasn't a huge blowout. And now for Washington this week, they're at home against Carolina. That's a winnable game, and they're still first place in their division. So technically, they're still first place in their division, and I don't see any reason to bump them down much further than 19th right now at 6-8. At 18, same record, no chance of the playoffs though. The 6-8 Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings lost against Chicago. That was, of course, a huge game, 33-27. Very hard-fought game too. Now for Minnesota, they're going into New Orleans against a New Orleans team that suddenly looks a little bit, well, human and maybe vulnerable. And so for Minnesota, we'll see how things go for them this week. Again, they're just playing out the string. They drop now to 6-8. And the little engine that could It looks like they're just going to sputter out just before the end of the season, but it's fine. Down year for Minnesota. I don't expect them to stay there. Number 17, the Raiders. So with that 30-27 loss, the Raiders are, I believe, still technically alive for the playoffs. I think there's still like tiebreakers they can get in with. They're not making it. So they're 7-7, and they're not making it. We'll see after the season's done who they decide that they're gonna push the blame on and say, all right, it's that guy. But 7-7 and losing against the Chargers, I couldn't have them in the top 2 rows. It was like they lost to the Chargers. That's my team, but I'm aware that they weren't very good coming into that game, and you know, the Raiders needed that game. They needed to win it, and they didn't get it. Number 16, New England. New England loses to Miami 22-12. For New England, that's it. They're 6-8. They're not making it. That's it. New England, for the first time since, I think, 1846, not going to be in the playoffs, and so they're playing out the string. And now they're at home against Buffalo in a game where Buffalo has already clinched the playoffs and clinched the division, and New England's playing out the string. It's 2020. That's one of the most 2020 things I can imagine, is New England suddenly being... I mean, they're still in the top 2 rows, but they're not making the playoffs. At number 15, Chicago. Chicago takes a jump this week based on the 33-27 win over Minnesota. They are still technically alive. Keep in mind, Arizona has that number 7 seed. For Arizona right now, they're at 8-6. Chicago's 7-7. Playoff hopes are slim, but they're not dead. So for Chicago, we'll see whether or not they can build on that. This week they're in Jacksonville. They should be able to build on that. They should beat Jacksonville. They really should. That should be a winnable game for Chicago. And for Jacksonville, they're like, yeah, we're number 32. We're going to get Trevor Lawrence. See how it goes for them. Number 14, Cardinals. So Arizona this week, they win 33-26 over Philadelphia. As I said, they go to 8-6. They are currently the number 7 seed in the NFC. So they're in it. We'll see whether or not they can hold on to that spot. But again, the only one that I think can mathematically catch them is Chicago. Minnesota, I mean, is 6-8, so they could catch them. I don't think they do. But yeah, I mean, Arizona looks like they should be in the playoffs this year. It'll be interesting to see how they do. Number 13, Baltimore. And I was on the fence with Baltimore. So they destroyed Jacksonville 40-14. For Baltimore, they're 9-5. And they've got to be frustrated because they're still not in the playoffs. They're behind on the tiebreaker to Miami. So they have to be frustrated to be 9-5, playing really well, and they're not in the playoffs. That has to be frustrating when you look at the NFC and see what gets you in, and then you look at the AFC and it's a lot more difficult. Now, for Baltimore, they're at home against the Giants. That's a very winnable game. So they could just keep going, but we could see a team win 10 games and not make the playoffs in the AFC. The AFC is very, very strong. Number 12, one of those strong teams, the team that Baltimore's chasing, and it's the Dolphins with that 22-12 win over New England. And now for Miami this week, they're going in against Vegas, a team that couldn't beat the Chargers. Yeah, Miami suddenly looks really good. Buffalo and Miami being the top 2 teams, that takes me way back. Being the top 2 teams in the AFCs, that takes me way back. I'm going to go ahead and say the 80s when I came into watching football. That takes me so far back to when it was Marino versus Kelly. And here we are. And I did not expect it in 2020. But there's a lot of things I didn't expect that happened in 2020. So there you go. So yeah, Miami, pretty strong season for them. They're guaranteed to be above 500. And at 9-5, they should make the playoffs. Number 11, Rams. This is where the drops hit. So the Rams, they lose against the Jets. Absolutely. You know what? The Rams, I could justify throwing them down to here right now. But I'm not going to. I'm not going to overreact. Because the Rams are still 9-5. They're still in a decent enough playoff spot right now to be the number 5 seeds and would play the Washington Kevin Malones in the wild card game. So for the Rams, I'm not going to freak out too much about this and drop them too much, but I had to drop them behind those other teams. And for the Rams, they now go to Seattle, and they have to win. If they lose against Seattle, this is done. That'll do it for them, and it'll get Seattle the division. So the Rams, absolutely 100% must-win game, and if they lose, they drop to 9-6, and Arizona wins. suddenly you got yourself in an even worse position. If you have a choice between playing New Orleans or playing Washington, you're probably going to want to play against Washington. So being that top wild card is important this year. Number 10, Pittsburgh. You know, it was only a few weeks ago Pittsburgh was number 1. They were number 1 because they were 11-0. Then they dropped that first game, and they hadn't looked great in games up to that first loss. So I dropped them down, and there was some discussion about whether or not Shannon's too hard on the Steelers. Is he too hard on the Steelers? And then last night, I watched what Cincinnati did to them, and the answer is no. I was being too nice to the Steelers. They're down at 10th. They're 11-3, right? 11-3. Yeah, they're going to make the playoffs. This is going to be great. But they're now the number 3 seed behind Buffalo and behind KC. They have virtually no chance of getting that bye in the first round. And if the playoffs started tomorrow, they'd be playing Indianapolis. Do you think they beat the Colts? My answer right now is no. Ben Roethlisberger is, to me, he looks like he's about done. I would be very surprised to see Roethlisberger come back next year. He cannot throw the deep ball like he used to. And Cincinnati had no respect for that, and not a lot of respect for Juju out there either. It was. I mean, they tightened up. The score got close towards the end. You know, they could have gone on a run, and they just didn't. And Cincinnati took that whole dancing on their logo thing very seriously. You can't have somebody doing that. You can't have somebody out on the field before the game's even started, pissing off the other team and getting them all riled up. This is a game that should have been an easy win for Pittsburgh because it's the Bengals that are down here, and it wasn't. Now for Pittsburgh, here's the worst part. Now they're at home against Indianapolis, their potential opponent in the wild card round, and I don't see them beating Indianapolis either. They need to turn this around, and they need to turn it around fast. And if you watched the post-game interview with the coach last night, he's choked as well. He knows just how bad this is going. And Pittsburgh, the wheels have just absolutely fallen right off. Number 9, Seattle. They beat Washington 20-15, and they benefited from jumping past a couple of teams that had a really bad week. You lose to the Jets, you lose to the Bengals, so Seattle passes you. Now for Seattle, they're against the Rams. They clinched themselves the division. For Seattle right now, they would play Tampa in the wild card round. That would not be something that you'd enjoy if you're Seattle. You don't want Tampa. So you're kind of in a roundabout way probably wanting New Orleans right now rather than Tampa, unless Drew Brees is going to be 100%, which when you hear about just how injured Drew Brees was, and then you hear like, oh well, they're gonna put him in. Really? Because it sounds like all of his ribs were broken. They say 11, but that means all of them. And I know how many ribs you have. I just mean that, you know, they're going to lie about the injury a lot of the time in sports anyways. I mean, it's not that bad. It was only 11. It's all of them. So, you know, we'll see how that works out for them. But yeah, Seattle, it's just outside that top row. Into the top row goes Indianapolis. Indianapolis is 10-4. For Indianapolis, they won 27-20 against Houston. And like I said, now they're against Pittsburgh, who at 11-3 suddenly don't look that great. And they're only one game ahead of these guys right here. Right above Indianapolis is Tennessee. Apologies, I almost put that up upside down. 46-25 was Tennessee's score over Detroit this week. Tennessee does have the tiebreaker in Indianapolis, so I switched them. I felt, well, Tennessee got a better win, I guess, than Indianapolis. We'll go that way. And for Tennessee, this week, they are in Green Bay. Huge challenge for them. And so both teams are playing against some pretty good playoff teams here. For Tennessee, they would play against Cleveland if the playoffs started tomorrow. Where is Cleveland? Number 6. I don't know if that's the highest they've been. I think that ties the highest they've been on the power rankings this year. For Cleveland, they held New York to 6 points. The Giants, not a factor. 20-6 is your final. Cleveland seems to be getting more confident. And here's the thing. Now they're playing against the Jets. Right? The Jets. The 1-13 Jets. If Cleveland wins and Pittsburgh were to lose against Indianapolis, suddenly they're tied for first in the division. The Cleveland Browns and Buffalo Bills could end up being divisional champions this year. If I had told you that at the start of the year, you would have said, You're crazy. You're insane. There's no way those teams are going to win. Maybe Buffalo, but Cleveland at both? You're insane. It could end up happening. We could end up being there. Number 5, you know what? I'm going to put New Orleans at 5, and I'm going to put Tampa Bay at 4. So, New Orleans is 10-4, Tampa Bay is 9-5. New Orleans lost this week, but they lost against Kansas City 32-29. Great. That's 2 losses in a row for New Orleans. New Orleans will drop to 5. For Tampa, they beat Atlanta 31-27. Tampa seems to have a lot of momentum with them right now. We'll see. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give Tampa 4. I'm going to give New Orleans 5. There is no Orlando in football. They have 32 teams. They do not have Orlando. So they're the division leaders, but I'm going to give Tampa Bay the number 4 spot this week. I went back and forth on it. You guys just saw me change it during the power rankings, so there you go. Tampa Bay 9-5, New Orleans 10-4. I would not be surprised to see Tampa Bay end up winning that division for Tom Brady reasons. Because Tom Brady, sure. Which brings us up to number 3. Number 3 is Green Bay. Green Bay is still at 3rd. They win 24-16 against Carolina. Green Bay is the number 1 seed in the NFC. They are 11-3. And again, they're just not losing. They're just not losing games. And this is the argument we had with the Steelers when they were 11-0. So for Green Bay, this week they're at home against Tennessee. We will get a really good picture of whether or not Green Bay is a real true number 1 seed or if they've just had an easy schedule. So for Green Bay, the Tennessee game is a good test for them. I think that's going to be a good measuring stick for where they're at right now. They're not winning by a ton in a lot of these games, and their opponents have been on the weaker side of things, but Tennessee will be a very nice challenge for them. Number 2, Buffalo. So if you're a fan of the Steelers, you feel like Buffalo fans normally do. If you're a Buffalo fan, this is how Steelers fans normally feel. For Buffalo, 48-19 over Denver. Just a laugher. Absolutely slaughtered them. And I think the last touchdown that made it 48-19 was the one that actually made me chuckle. Like, wow, now they're just being mean now. They could run out the clock. So for Buffalo, this matchup with New England this week is also going to feel weird. Buffalo's the team with their future in their hands. Buffalo's the number 2 seed and would play Miami if the playoffs started tomorrow. I love the idea of Buffalo and Miami. Yes, please. That would be a great one. So for Buffalo, number 2, which means that number 1 is, again, KC. I don't see how Mahomes isn't the MVP. I'd be very surprised if Mahomes isn't the MVP. You can make the argument for Rodgers, but Kansas City's 13-1. They won 32-29 this week over New Orleans, and now for KC, they're at home against Atlanta this coming week. So it's going to be interesting. I will say this, too, that this is the second to last power rankings I'm going to do. Next week will be the last power rankings for the National Football League. After that, I'll be doing previews for the playoffs and reviews of the playoffs as we get through them. It's going to be a bit of a slog for me when January 13th rolls around and the NHL comes back, but I will do my best to keep abreast of what's going on with both the NFL and the NHL. Yes, I said that word. Stop giggling. But yeah, Kansas City's been great, and if you're going to pick a winner for the Super Bowl, I think Buffalo and KC could be deciding the winner. Because I don't think there's anybody out of the NFC who can win it. Right now, I would say no. Whoever wins the AFC should be your Super Bowl winner. But we'll see. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. This has been a very interesting football season. Of all the years where I can finally give the attention to the NFL like I used to, this has been a fascinating one to watch. So it's been a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for watching. Do hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I'll talk to you again soon.